Guys, thank you for coming. We're going to talk about a great subject today. No, not so great, but something that we have to talk about. We talk about trauma. Trauma, getting over trauma, dealing with pain. Rab Nachman, the name Rab Nachman was the key. Many of his Torah is focused on consoling people. His books are not like how do you make $1 million. It's how do you deal with suffering, because he knew what the generation was going to deal with. So Rab Nachman really specialized in helping us how to deal with pain and give pain meaning. So once a person understands, has the da'at to understand it, he can actually move on and he can actually have an unbelievable life. You have no idea how many people I meet every single day stuck in limited beliefs. You have no idea how many people I see in drug rehab coming in and with tremendous trauma, with tremendous addictions, just because they don't understand the system. If they understood the system, they would never be like that. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to explain to you how the system works. If you understand how the system works, you're going to be able to recycle your pain. That's what you need to do. Recycle your pain. If you recycle your pain, you know what happens? You get a reward for it. Otherwise, what happens? You cry in pain and you get no reward. So our job today is to tell you guys how to recycle your pain. We can't get stuck in time machines. A lot of people are stuck in time machines. And you guys want to just close the door? If you can, please. A lot of people are stuck in time machines. And for limited beliefs. What happens is the way our brain works. If our brain is constantly dealing with trauma 24 hours a day, it's impossible for it to develop anything new. Let's understand that. If you can't fight two things at the same time. You can't deal with trauma and deal with building a business at the same time. You can't deal with trauma and deal with a relationship at the same time. It's very difficult. One's going to give. It's almost impossible. Why? Because our brain records what's wrong, usually. It usually records traumatic experiences to protect you again from them. It doesn't record every time you got somebody told you how great you were. It records negative things much more with a lot more intensity. Why? So it doesn't happen to you again. So God created our brain to protect you from harm. It didn't create your brain to make you happy. So unfortunately, this is something that we have to really work at. So tonight you're going to get an unbelievable class on how the system works. I'm going to give you practical tools. I see it in rehab. I see it with people. We have 3,000 people on the WhatsApp list, and I see patterns. I see the same patterns that one incident in their life, it's stopping them their whole life. It's basically, it's like having a Ferrari with the brakes on your whole life. Imagine living your whole life with the brakes on. Look at the potential you could live on. I personally went through a tremendous amount of trauma. And I applied this advice. I didn't even know I was applying this advice. I ended up realizing once I read it that this is the key to everything. So we know who was the first person to experience trauma. Who was the first person addicted? Was Noah. Noah was the first case of a person who experiences post-traumatic stress disorder. What happened? Noah, he got out of the ark. He sees the whole world being destroyed. What did he do? He tried to take a pill. He tried to get drunk. The Satan told him, listen, just take one more drink. But what happened with Noah? What happened? He got drunk. So we know there's a correlation between trauma and addictions. I can almost guarantee you 90% of the trauma that people go through ends up becoming an addiction. So unfortunately, then you're dealing with trauma, then you're dealing with an addiction, then you're dealing with blaming yourself. How do you get out of that? And that's why you see people taking their lives. So I had to do this class, and I had to spend a lot of time on this class, because it's very, very important. Because once you see how the system works, you'll have a different way of looking at it, and I'm going to give you definitely a way to cope with it. And it will let you be able to turn your post-traumatic stress into post-traumatic growth. We want to turn post-traumatic stress into post-traumatic growth. Okay? Let's start. Okay, so we know Noah was the first case of a person having trauma and turning to an addiction. This is not, a lot of people judge people in recovery or judge people in addictions. People have trauma in their life and they don't know where to turn. So they'd rather be out of their head than in their head. In their head, it's much more painful, so they'd rather be out of their head. So you can't always blame people. Listen, this guy's an addict. You have no idea what people go through. We're not here to judge. We are not here to judge. We all had some kind of addiction in our life, whether you want to admit it or not. Everybody says, Gedalia, you're too out of the box. I said, yeah, I'm out of the box because the inbox thing is not working. Look at the amount of people depressed. Look at the amount of people in synagogues being depressed. It's not working, the inbox thing. So I said, I'm going to take it as a compliment that I'm out of the box. And I will continue to be out of the box for my whole life. Because what do? They look at a box, they stare at a box, they watch a box, and that's their whole life. They're in a box. I said, no. I'm completely out of the box, and I will never be in a box. Poo. So that's something we have to look at. So it all started basically, the addiction between trauma and addiction is very common. Because a person, obviously, they want to numb the pain. They don't know how to deal with the pain. It's something that people start blaming themselves for it. These are some of these limited beliefs, unfortunately, that people have. They start blaming themselves. It happened to me. I went through a divorce. I went through my son having cancer. I went through my business turning. I went through trauma, a trifecta of trauma, all at one time. And that experience actually made me into who I am today. So at the end of trauma, comes a big reward. So let's understand that a lot of times our trauma is going to lead to addiction. What happens is the problem with trauma is if we don't deal with it properly, it shortens your cycles in your brain. For example, your amygdala is your back of your brain. That amygdala, according to what kind of stress you're under, according to what kind of threat, anything that's remotely relative to threat, all of a sudden it goes off. So it's actually looking for a threat. I would say your amygdala is comparable to, for example, a very sensitive car alarm. You know, these car alarms are very, very sensitive. Even if you whisper, danger, 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 danger. So what happens? From your back of your brain, all that cortisol goes to the front of your brain, and imagine trying to go on a car 150 miles per hour and stopping short. What do you think your brain's going to do? It can't handle it. It crashes. So the back of the brain affects the front of the brain, which is your prefrontal cortex, and that's where you're making decisions. So what happens is trauma causes what? Unfortunately, our ability to think properly and make logical decisions, you can't make them because you're dealing with so much amount of cortisol, and it shortens the ability for a person to have new brain cells, a new neural pathway. That's why EMDR therapy is good. That's why neurofeedback is good, because what are we doing? We're rebuilding new brain cells. I'm just giving you the science first before I get into the spiritual, okay? And then it also affects your hippocampus, which is responsible for memory. What happens is your memory, you don't know the difference between something that just happened yesterday or something that happened today. So all of a sudden, somebody could be in a traumatic experience, a guy can sit a certain way, and all of a sudden this person will freeze. They will freeze because they'll remember, they don't know that happened 20 years ago, but they interpret it as a threat now. So if your amygdala is constantly viewing everything as a threat, what happens? It burns out, and you completely burn out. So that's why, if this is not dealt with properly, if we don't deal with the threats, unfortunately, we don't have the brain to get out of the problem. Does everybody understand that? So the effects on your brain, you have to actually go to some kind of therapy. It's not enough just to, listen to it. You have to go to some kind of therapy because there are neural pathways in your brain that got affected, and you have to rebuild them. How do you rebuild them? A new habit. But it causes damage. It causes long-term damage to a person's brain. Okay? So let's talk about how the world was created. This is very, very important to understand this. Okay? I'm going to explain to you now how the world was created. You are a miniature world. Okay? You are a miniature world. Everybody goes through a certain cycle in their life, no matter who they are. It all starts with God created the world with tons of light. What happens if God did not contract himself to a situation? What happens? Then there would be just too much light, and there wouldn't be any kind of creation. So what did God do? He contracted himself in the beginning of creation. He created a tzimtzum. A tzimtzum is a contraction of light. So basically, God removed himself from the picture. Understand? God removed himself from the picture. So it looks to us that sometimes you see, when a person is going through trauma, a person is going through, God forbid, an abuse, where's God in the picture? How could this happen to me? So what happens is God removes himself from the picture in order to create reality. The reason why this has to happen is because in order for a person gets tested today based on his free will. If everything was easy, it'd be like walking in the day with a lamp on. What's the point of that? If you know the answers, if you know what to do, you get reward in life on your free will. When it's very difficult for you to make a decision and you make the right decision. So after this contraction of light, what happened? Let me explain to you this concept called there was a shattering of the vessels. You need to understand this concept. This is trauma 101. This is the spiritual backbone of trauma. What is the shattering of the vessels? What is the shattering of the vessels? Basically, you guys ever heard of the Big Bang Theory? In spiritually, there was a shattering of the vessels. That means everybody has to go through trauma, one way or another. Whether it's a divorce, whether, God forbid, it could have been sexual abuse, whether it could have been physical abuse, whatever your package is in your life, you got to get something. There's no way to escape trauma because part of creation was the shattering of the vessels. What happened is God created the vessels with a built-in flow. That means they were supposed to break. Just like the first tablets, we know the Moshe Rabbeinu who broke the first tablets. What happens? Just like that, the first 10 Sfirot had a built-in flow, so that could be the person's trauma. Everybody has to go through trauma. I don't care who you are. Sometimes it comes to you very early. Sometimes it comes to you very late. Sometimes it comes through a divorce, child abuse, broken relationship. Whatever it is, you're going to go through trauma. There's not one person that I know that didn't go through some kind of trauma. Shattering of the vessels is part of creation. What happens when people take that experience and they personalize it and they say, I'm not good. I'm not good enough. You have to understand that everybody has to go through this experience. Let's give it a comparison to imagine one day you're sitting home in your living room, you have a beautiful 30-pound chandelier, all of a sudden, you know what happens? It breaks into 150 pieces. Imagine having a chandelier in your life. That's the trauma that we're talking about. 150 pieces, it comes down, it breaks into 150 pieces. And you know what happens? All of a sudden, what happens? You're walking around, everywhere you walk around, it reminds you of the chandelier that broke. That's the shattering of vessels that happens also in your own mind. So our job in life is to pick up these pieces. Now, what happens? If you get stuck in fear, what happens? You don't put that chandelier up. So imagine going through life, walking around with a piece of glass on your foot and say, what happened to my light? So now now you're going to be depressed because all you can think about is you have no light because you're scared. Our fear is what happens. I have friends that they got divorced. It was such a traumatic experience, they'll never get married again. Or I had friends of mine that were married, they got baptized. That's how bad their relationship was. I said, listen, you could have went conservative, you could have went to Chabad. Why'd you get baptized? It was so bad that they went completely against Judaism. And I'm talking to, it was so bad, they got baptized. I said, what, you just went crazy? This is the shattering of the vessels. Could be a drug addiction. So what happens is if we don't put up that new light, if we don't go against our tikkun, what happens? We come home, there's no light, there's a bunch of scars on the floor, and you got major trauma. And there's no way around that. The only way, because part of creation is the shattering of the vessels, our job in our whole life is to deal with this addiction, deal with this trauma that we had to. But the difference is, if I put a new 50-pound light up, then what am I going to say if I got a piece of glass on my foot? Listen, if the 30-pound didn't break, I would never be able to put the 50-pound one on. You understand? So that gives you, it means if a person is held back because of fear, because of a traumatic experience, his whole tikkun is to do exactly what he got trauma from. He has to do the complete opposite. If you failed in business, you know what you have to do? You have to open up a business tomorrow. I went through the most traumatic divorce that you could imagine, and you know what I did 30 days later? I got married. Because I said, if I sit there and live in fear, then what am I going to do? And what happens, because your traumatic experience is so bad, that anytime the new wife will even say something like the first wife, all of a sudden you're going to get paralyzed. So your job, this is what shattering of the vessels is not like one-time pain. It's something I have to deal with the rest of my life. And I have to realize that this is my tikkun. According to my past life, this is the trauma that I have to deal with. It could have been a parent, could have been sexual abuse. We know sexual abuse, not only does it affect the person, but it affects the new relationship. When they want to have a relationship with a new partner, they can't do it because of the trauma that they had. And his tikkun is to have relationships, to not be afraid and say that has nothing to do. I'm filling my tikkun by going absolutely against. And this is exactly what happens what do you think you're reading every time we sit down for Passover? What do you think that happened to us? What was the traumatic experience? The first one is the removal of God's light. It's the desperation the Jews had. Where's God? How could he put us in slavery? So the first thing you're going to say when a person is going through a traumatic experience, trauma, he's going to say, where's God in the picture? Where's God? How could this happen to me? How is this possible? So what happens, most people, they numb the pain. They want to be out of their minds. They take pills, they take drugs, and they're doing it for a good intention to be out of their mind. They're not doing it because it happened. But they have to realize this happens to everybody. It's almost like telling you, by the way, when you're born, you're going to get a bar mitzvah, you're going to get a bris, and you're going to get trauma. That's your package. At least tell me I'm going to get trauma, and tell me when is it coming. Well, it's going to happen to you. You see, my whole point is don't get caught with your pants down in life, because if you understand that it's not my fault. Most people in trauma that are dealing with the situation, they say I could have caused it to happen. It was my fault. Or they get into a divorce and they say, I'll never be able to get married. I'm a lousy husband. I'm a lousy wife. I'm not good enough. And then what happens? Now you're dealing with the trauma. You never put the new light on, and then you're blaming yourself. Where is that going to take you? That's a recipe for absolutely despair, disaster, and you're done. You're done. Your job is to completely go against whatever is your tikkun, whatever is your fear. You have to face your fear, and your fear will disappear. That's the only way to deal with trauma, is to absolutely do the exact same thing that your fear is, to go 100% all in on it. To put that new chandelier, because sometimes God wants to give you a 30-pound chandelier, but he has to break the first one that's 20 pounds. This is a story of business. This is the story of this. Get comfortable with trauma. It's part of life. It happens to everybody. Don't let it ruin the rest of your life and not let you go on, which is happening to a lot of people. I'm giving you guys the spiritual effect. We could talk to therapists all day long. Yes, we're gonna tell you how to deal with it. But if I'm already telling you, don't try to forget it. Don't try to numb it. Don't try to repress the trauma. Just understand that every time I get a piece of glass in my foot, I'm going to say, look, I have a beautiful new chandelier. And then I have a power to choose what I want to focus on. I can choose the 50-pound chandelier, and then I can say, okay, my scars are my medals. That means you should look at your scars in your life. This is my medal. This is what my ex-wife did to me, Baruch Hashem. This is what this one did to me. Your scars, you should walk around with your scars as medals, not as weaknesses, not as bandages. They should be your medals. This is, look, without this trauma, I wouldn't be here today from this situation. Basically, you have to go from a victim says, why is this happening to me? What does the hero say? What's next? What do I do next? What do I do to go against? If you have no idea how many guys that are single, they don't want to commit to the new girl just because of fear. Nothing else but fear, because they think that the same thing's going to happen in the same relation. It's a different world. The trauma already happened. Now what do you have to do? You have to make a tikkun. So in the Jews in Egypt, what did the Jews in Egypt go through? First, what happens? They saw the abandonment of God. That's the first thing a person that goes through a traumatic experience, he feels God abandoned him. Where's God? That's the tzimtzum. That's where God has to contract the light. The second thing, what happens, is the shvirat kelim, the actual trauma. What's the trauma here? The trauma there was the actual slavery. That's what we remind. Why would you sit in your Pesach table and talk about the trauma that you went through? Because this is life. Your job is to elevate the trauma, elevate the sparks from the trauma, and don't blame yourself. Stop blaming yourself. When you blame yourself, you want to numb the pain, you don't go forward, and what happens? Your whole life's on hold for no reason. If you understood the Torah about God's telling you this is part of creation, there's no problem. And you get big rewards when a person is able to go against his fears. That's the number one reward you get from heaven. I'm going to give you specifically how to do it. So, after the Shvirat HaKelim, what happens? The Tikkun. The Jews getting out of Mitzrayim. This cycle, it happens to everybody. You just have to pick who knows what trauma you're going to get. Who knows what you're going to get. Everybody's got something. Midlife crisis. That's that guy's trauma. You almost want to get it over with. And you don't want to give energy to something you don't like. But if a person's all day long thinking about this traumatic experience and not putting on a new light and not putting on the chandelier, then he's going to have a lot. How do I get him out of it? How do you get a guy out of it? He's got nothing to be happy about. All he can think about is trauma all his life. And the whole time he's blaming himself for no reason. It's almost like a new business. You open up a new business, imagine you're $150,000 in debt, but your new business is making $250 a month. So you're like, okay, I'll pay the $150,000 in debt. Look what I'm making in my new business. But if you're in a new business that's losing money and you have $150,000 debt, crash. The whole thing crashes. So if we understand the Shvirat HaKelim, it'll give you tranquility, and it'll give you the ability to deal with life and understand that those pieces of glass, you can buy a mansion, you can buy a palace on the ocean, you're going to step on them. And they're going to remind you of the past. They're going to remind you of something that broke in your life one time. And you know what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to direct your focus on the new beautiful chandelier that created, because you took action. We could talk about motivation all day long. But until we sit there and face our fears, you have nothing. You're just dealing in the past. And then you become a time machine. We know Rav Nachman says the major cause of depression, sickness, is depression today. So this is something that's very serious. It's not a joke. Because I see there people's lives were on hold. Here, pause. Put the pause button. Nothing's happening until that guy faces the trauma. Now, one thing goes wrong with your life, it shouldn't sink the whole boat. That's what we're trying to get everybody. Understanding that this is part of creation. Number one thing, stop blaming yourselves. It was built in with a flaw. That means God created trauma with already a built-in flaw. It had to break. No matter who you are, it had to break. Don't blame yourselves. That's where the problems are happening today. People are blaming themselves, and they're not looking at their good points. And that causes them not only what? Then you don't have confidence. You have no light, you're stepping on glass, and you have no confidence. How are you going to go? Why would you want to live life? And then you say, God, this religion's not for me. I'm out of here. I can't. A God that to do this to me? That's why on Tisha B'Av, Mashiach comes. You know when Mashiach comes? On the eve of Tisha B'Av. On the eve of Tisha B'Av. That means the worst day of the world that's coming, the worst day possible, that's the beginning of your salvation. Your salvation can happen the minute you say, you know what? I didn't realize that the whole problem was Shvirat HaKelim. I blame myself for absolutely no reason. That's the therapy you have to do. So first you have to repair your brain, because your brain took a lot of hits. So we have to do meditation, CBT therapy, EMDR. But then you have to go and say, if you don't have the new thing that you went for, the new chandelier you put up, that new business you did, that new marriage you did, then that limitation defines you, and you become that person. That's the guy who had this happen to him. Poor thing. And what happens to that person? That person, now it's a good excuse to stay in that problem, because now he doesn't have to work. See, it's very easy to stay in that problem, because now all of a sudden I'm in that problem. I really don't have to do anything new. I could stay here, everybody's going to come home, and they're going to ask me, what happened to your light? Let me tell you the story. What happened to me. So why didn't you put the new one on? Amazon Prime is coming next door. They'll put a new one up for you in 24 hours. Just make a decision. No, I like this. I like the darkness. So that's what happens. What do? Our negative thoughts clog our heart, and they stop our creation. That means your whole creation stops. Zero. No creation until you sit there and say, I don't care. It happened to me. It happens to everybody. It's not my fault. I'm moving on. Then you go from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth. Otherwise, you stay in post-traumatic stress your whole life. I see people all day long. So when we give meaning, When we give meaning to something, that's what Reb Nachman's going to tell us. That suffering disappears when you find meaning. How do you find meaning? Let's talk about how do you find meaning. So now we understand where's the chandelier that you've had in your life and what did you do with it? Did you put a new one on? If you didn't, go to the light store tomorrow. Otherwise, you're going to be in darkness. There's no happy endings here. I've yet to see a happy ending of a person all of a sudden change his life just sitting there doing nothing and thinking about all his trauma. I have yet to see it. Show me the one guy. I've yet to see it. Yet to see that person. Only the person that was able to recycle his pain, and from that pain, he found meaning. I met a lady the other day. She had a cancer. From her cancer came a wig business. We know Tony Robbins, big Tony Robbins fans. Tony Robbins had 4 fathers, alcoholics. His mother beat the crap out of him. And from there he realized, you know what? I have to stop suffering for the whole world. And if it wasn't for that, he tells it all the time. If it wasn't for that incident, he would never be who he is today. That was his trauma. Les Brown, he got a motivational speaker. He was born in an abandoned building called mentally retarded. And today he's charging people hundreds of thousands of dollars to give motivational speech. Wayne Dyer was born in an orphanage. He was in an orphanage when he was 3 years old. He had no father, and from there he realized how he liked to help people. So this is the story of creation. This is a story of trauma. The only difference between people who make it and people who don't make it are the people who put that chandelier back on and don't become the victims. They're able to approach life instead of avoid life. We know Reb Nachman says in lesson 91 that you have to understand that Munna has to come before intellect. In our religion, in Judaism, why you tell people, listen, if you want to find out the solution to your life, why don't you go to the blueprint of creation? Go to the blueprint. Find out what the Torah is telling you. I know you went to everybody else, but what does the Torah tell you? The Torah tells you there's going to be chaos before light. So now you understand there's going to be tohu vahu. God created this trauma, and then you're going to have light. That means you have to have a munah before intellect. What happens if you don't have a munah? Then you just worry. Then you rely on your own intellect, and your intellect's going to say, "What? This doesn't make sense to me. Where is God here?" And what do? That whole opportunity is waiting for you. Your whole life is waiting for you. But what happens? You didn't approach the munah first. That's why when we say Shema, we close our eyes first, and then we say Shema. You understand? Emunah before intellect. Don't try to figure things out, because the whole purpose of this creation is to have emunah. This is the biggest battle today is emunah. Is old-fashioned belief. It sounds so simple. People have bumper cars. I love emunah. I love emunah. Emunah, garden of emunah. Okay, you have so much emunah. How long do you spend time praying? 5 minutes? 3 minutes? You don't have emunah. If you have emunah, you open up your mouth. If you don't have emunah, you can't say you have emunah, because emunah means opening up your mouth and believing that whatever I say can change the world. If you don't have emunah, then don't tell me you have emunah and you're not opening up your mouth. You can't meditate on nothingness and say I have emunah, or I'm a vegan and I'm so spiritual. That's a bunch of we all know that's a bunch of BS. That's not spiritual. Spiritual means getting the skeletons in your closet out. Working on the skeletons in your closet, working on the traumatic experiences in your life, and figuring out where is my trauma? How do I elevate this trauma? How do I elevate? Because God gave me that trauma because that was part of my tikkun in this world, and my whole life I might have to fight that. My whole life I might have to fight an addiction. You ever realize some of these addictions never go away? They don't go away. You can't put them in an escrow account. The whole life he's got to go to 12-step meetings, because that's the way he does it. And hopefully, through that trauma, you know what he does? He elevates people usually. When a person goes through traumatic experiences the right way, not only does he deal with the trauma, but he's able to elevate other people. And he went through that experience so he can tell other people exactly what to do. Oprah Winfrey, she was raped. Oprah Winfrey was raped. Look what she's doing. I mean, every story. There's no stories that I've heard without a trauma. The only difference between Oprah Winfrey becoming who she is her being able to be resilient and saying nobody's going to affect the way I live. And she became. That was her tikkun. If she didn't do it, she would have been. There would be no Soul Oxygen or whatever the name of her show is. That's it. You have freedom of choice. That's where the ball's in your court. That means the trauma is happening to you. The difference is why God created it is because if it wasn't, it would be too easy for everybody. What's the purpose? That's what the Arizal says here. He says, in order for a man to reach his potential, God had to conceal his light and thereby allow the possibility of evil. So once you have this breaking of the vessels, that's where evil existed in life. That's the beginning of evil. Because you could say, how could God create a guy to molest the children? What kind of crazy, sick thing is this? How could this happen? It's because evil exists. Believe it or not, evil exists. It had to be created as part of creation in order for a person to have free choice. Because otherwise, everybody would win. And then if everybody would win, everybody would walk around with a flashlight in the middle of the day and say, look, there's light. Then what's the purpose? Your whole tikkun is a Munna. A Munna means, I'm in the dark, I can't see it. That's when you bring your flashlight. So he's saying here, if nothing was good, then it wouldn't be possible. There would be no benefit. The Talmud says it would be like carrying a lamp in broad daylight. No purpose, no free will, absolutely nothing. So that's why evil has to exist. Evil is part of creation. There's nothing to do about it. Your job is to fight it. Fight it and be able to move on. You get the biggest rewards in life when whatever's holding you back, you go against it. If it's a marriage that you don't want to commit to because you're afraid of your new wife, you got to commit it. You got to go in headstrong. Then you will get tremendous amount of blessing. So our limited beliefs, because of trauma, ends up defining people. And people stay in an addiction. People stay, God forbid, in numbness. You can't avoid life. You have to approach life. And you have to say, every time you get a piece of glass in your foot, it's okay. That's my tikkun. Here you go. Look at the new one. Look at the new one that I just put. Look at this beautiful chandelier. That's my medals. These are my medals. My scars are my medals. That's what you should be saying. That's what every single person in the world who's had success will tell you. People that are spoiled, they get everything, they end up losing everything. You know that. We don't have to. We don't have to. You almost want to get the pain over with quickly in life. You want it to get over with quickly. So you get it over with. So you don't have to deal with it all the time. But once you have a lot of other stuff going on in life, then it's very easy to get over it. So how does Reb Nachman tell us to transcend pain? Unbelievable, unbelievable, unbelievable. By the way, he wrote this 250 years ago, Reb Nachman. You could see how he was above anything else that we can imagine. There's a concept called bittul. You know what bittul means? Bittul means to nullify yourself. What does bittul mean? Bittul means to make yourself into nothing. What happens is the pain is not really caused by the actual thing that happened. It's our thoughts about the situation. You understand? So he's saying here, why does a person feel pain? Rav Nachman says here, people experience pain only because their dat has been taken away from them. I speak to people, obviously we have addicts, they have to go through a detox program. They're screaming in pain, but they don't realize that without the detox program, there's no way you're even going to be able to understand to get recovery. That detox program, that pain, if you close your eyes to the detox program, you realize without the detox, I can't even ever get help. So the detox, that pain is actually good pain, but he doesn't see it. He doesn't want to deal with it, but he doesn't realize if you don't go through that pain, there's no life. My whole life could be held up for 3 days of pain. You understand? So what is he telling us here? What happens is why we go through pain is because our awareness has been taken away from us. We don't know why the pain happened to us. It could have been, for example, repentance of our sins. It could have been because we're going on the wrong mission. Sometimes a person's going on the wrong mission in his life. You know what God does to him? He flips his life around. That's what happened to me, by the way. He flips your life around. You think you're going here? No. You're going here. But unfortunately, like I said, first God whispers to you, you're going the wrong way. Then he yells at you, you're going the wrong way. You don't hear it. And then he knocks the door down in your life. And then you ask, how come you knocked the door down? That's what happens, unfortunately. So how should a person deal with pain? If you understand, when a person's under pain today, when you're getting a root canal, you're getting a surgery, what do you normally do? what do you do? What do we normally do when we're in pain? You close your eyes, correct? You don't. When the guy's yanking out your tooth, you're not looking, right? What is he telling us to do for pain? The first thing a person has to do with pain is he has to close his eyes to it. He has to tap into the future. If I just deal with the pain right now, I'm not going to be able to deal with it. It's not possible. It's too overbearing. The first advice from Nachman is telling us, close your eyes to the pain. Don't question the pain. Don't talk about the pain. First step is nullify yourself. It's almost like, I'm going to give you this example, so you should remember. It's almost like you have a little seed on the ground, and you have a 50-foot tree. In order for that seed to become that 50-foot tree, it has to nullify itself. What does it have to do? What good is the seed if it's not in the ground? When the seed goes into the ground, what happens? The seed rottens and it becomes a tree. That's what we have to do. We're the little seed that until we deal with the pain the right way, we close our eyes to the pain. It's a whole step he's going to tell us. That tree never grows. That means as long as we're stuck on how come this happened to me, then I can't humble myself. If I accept the pain, then what do? I humble myself, I put the seed on the ground, there's the beginning of my new life. There is the beginning of my new life. Until I do that, until I said, you know what, Hashem, I'm going to rely on Munna before intellect, I'm going to rely on you, and I'm going to put the seed on the ground by not questioning, by closing my eyes and accepting that there's a bigger reason why this is happening. Then you put the seed onto the ground, you grow. Until then, it's like you have beautiful seed. What a beautiful seed. Beautiful, beautiful. Unless it's on the ground, unless you humble yourself and accept it, why this is happening to you, then nothing happens. Potential. You have a seed in potential. Until it goes into the ground, there's no growth. So Rav Nachman's telling us here that we're supposed to first close our eyes to the pain. Close your eyes. You need to nullify the pain. You need to make yourself bittul. Basically, you have to make yourself into nothing. Imagine if your wife is screaming at you. What happens? If you listen to it, you're gonna get, she's screaming at me. You're gonna feel a lot of pain. You have to close your eyes and make yourself into nothing. I don't hear anything. I'm just giving an example of a wife. I'm not talking about my wife. I'm just giving an example of a person. What happens is you're supposed to nullify yourself to that situation. Whatever that situation, I went through some situations, I had to close my eyes. Because if I opened up my eyes, it would be too bearable. So the first step Rav Nachman's telling you is don't attack it, don't fight it. Close your eyes to the pain. When you close your eyes, you put yourself into bittul. You nullify, you cancel yourself out. Once you close your eyes, you know what happens? Then you're tapping into the future. We don't know why this is happening to us. There's a much bigger picture, but we don't know right now. So when you close your eyes, you're actually tapping into something much, much bigger. That's why when something is very far away, how do you look at it? You can't see it normally. What do? You squint. How come something why should I be able to look at something so far away and not see it clearly? Why do I have to squint? Why do I have to squint? Because I have to narrow my vision. Because I have to look beyond right here. Because if I look beyond here, I'm not going to like what I look behind here. The pain is coming from our thoughts about the situation. Now I understand. Now I have to first close my eyes. Once I close my eyes, you know what happens to me? I'm going into a bittul. I'm nullifying myself. I'm becoming a seed that's going into the ground. So what happens now? Once you come out of that, guess what's going to happen now? Now you're going to feel the pain even stronger. Because you know what happens? You got a major intellect that just came to you because when we suffer, the only time you're going to close your eyes in life is when you suffer. In order to get meaning in life, you have to close your eyes. Correct? In order to get meaning, in order to understand why this happened to you, it's not going to be revealed to you by an email. It's going to reveal to you by meaning. You're going to find the purpose why this happened to you. You can only get that by closing your eyes. So once a person, what happens? Once a person opens his eyes, you know what happens after? Then the pain is going to be more intense. You know why? Because the Yetzer Hara sees, wow, this guy's looking beyond right now. He's looking at something much bigger. He's looking at something much, much bigger, so it attacks him. And it's almost like a wrestler. When two wrestlers are fighting each other, when one sees that it's gaining ground on the other, you know what happens? There's extra darkness. So the first step is, you're going to have to close your eyes to the situation you're in. The second step is, you're going to wake up and you're going to feel double the pain. Double the pain that because you thought, wow, I closed my eyes, I thought I'm out of this thing. And then I wake up, I'm like, oh no, I'm not out of this thing at all. It's even worse. The pain is even 100 times worse. So what happens after, according to the struggle that you have, because what happens, you're getting new light from above. According to the struggle that you have, that means I can't have a lot of light without a vessel, correct? What good is a lot of light? I just got 100 pounds of water, but no vessel. Through the struggle and fighting that pain, and closing your eyes, and not allowing that pain to get to you, you build a vessel. Once you build that vessel, guess what's going to give it to you? You're going to get the meaning of why something happened to you. Once you understand, oh my God, I had to go through an addiction program in order for me to open up a drug rehab program. Wow, that whole thing was meant so I can open up a drug rehab program. I had to go through cancer in order to open up a wig business. If it wasn't from the cancer, I would never open up the wig business. You're going to get a gift. What happens after a person suffers and he goes through something, you know what he gets? He gets a gift. He gets a gift. He gets something from the next world already. He gets something above time. Once he gets that gift, you know what happens? He gets meaning. So how does it, Rav Nachman says, how do you know that you came out of something the right way? How do you know if you came out of something the right way? If you find meaning. If you find a meaning out of it. Because you're going to get a gift. After pain comes a gift. That's why I tell people, you're crying anyway. You might as well cry to deal with the pain. Crying just for the pain, cry to deal with the pain. That means after that experience that you went through, you're going to get meaning. Rav Nachman promises that after that, he's going to, like me. If that pain caused me to do what I'm doing today, how the hell would I have been in that business? No other way. If it wasn't from this pain. In a person's life, it could be, wow, I met my wife in rehab. I can't believe if I didn't go to the rehab, I would never have met my wife. If I never went through this experience, I would never have a relationship with Hashem. If I never went through this experience, I would have never went through that. That's what we need to look for. In order to permanently get rid of something, to find meaning, and not to get stuck in trauma, you need to find meaning. Otherwise, what happens, I get stuck in trauma. I get stuck in post-traumatic stress. These flashes come to me all the time, and then I freak out, and then I will never get out of it. So Rav Nachman is telling us we have to actually nullify ourselves. So that's why Rav Nachman says, if something's happened to you, what do you need to do? You know what you need to do? You need to look at, there's a bigger goal going on. It's not, there's something much, much bigger going on. It could be a divorce. It could be this. Because once you find meaning, you know what you're going to do? You're going to have joy. You're going to have joy. You're going to be happy. And you're going to understand it. And you're going to have clarity. That's why Viktor Frankl came out with logotherapy. And he says, see, why meaning is so important? Because Freud, if you look at regular psychology, Freud rejects God completely. He says God is a made-up thing that man made. That means normal psychology is not involved in meaning. It's not involved in meaning. That means, how am I going to ever get through a problem if I'm just dealing with past problems and trying to, go from a negative thought to a positive thought? It's going to be very difficult. Overall, I'm going to break. But if I'm able to deal with it for the future by finding meaning, which Rav Nachman tells you, you're going to find meaning only when you put the seed and you accept and you say, you know what, Hashem, I didn't realize that the whole world has trauma. I thought it was just me. I thought I was the only guy that had it. And I didn't realize, and I blamed myself for 20 years, and I said it's my fault, I'm not enough, and all these crazy things that we say to ourselves because we don't know. We don't know. That's why the Torah is the ultimate. People running away from the Torah. They're running away. You want to hear a class? No, not for me. Let me hear this guy better. But the Torah that's why, you know what happens with the Satan is very good. You know what he does? He closes your eyes. Anything to help you, you know what he does? Closes your eyes to it. Closes your eyes. So you don't see. So you don't think, how could the Torah heal me? The Torah is outdated. No, this is your perception. So what happens, people live in misery, but once I find meaning, then I'm probably going to be able to have resilience. What's the difference between a person having, see, if you have meaning, and you have Hashem with you, then you're like a flame. What's the difference between a candle and a flame? What does a candle do? A candle's weak. That means any little wind, what happens to the candle? Blows up. Finished. The guy has a weak foundation, he's a little candle. One little incident, finished. He's done. What does a flame do? You give flame fuel. What does the fuel do? It makes the fire even stronger. That's what you have to be. You have to be a flame. And that's the only way you're going to be a flame, is to completely control what you focus on and to not let these little sparks in your life control your life. That's why in the Holocaust, the minute that the Jews, what did the Jews do in the Holocaust? The big tzaddikim, they put the grounds in America. Start building Torah again. We're not going to let our past define us. If it wasn't for the tzaddikim that went against all odds, what did they do? Started building in America without any question. So how could you build Torah? Look what the Holocaust did to everybody. Look what the Gedolim did. If it wasn't for these major the Mir Yeshiva, the sacrifice that they did, because they saw something much bigger. They weren't focused. Remember, what causes the pain is the intellect. The soul knows what it has to do. The intellect, the pain comes from your not having the clarity on why something happened to you. If you look at today, you're going to see it across the board. You have to find clarity. Otherwise, you get stuck in an addiction. You get stuck in negative beliefs. You're dealing with trauma your whole life. And yeah, you can go to a psychologist all day long. I had this incident today. This person was at the park. And then I'm just battling every day. I'm not getting out of it. You need to go against your will, and you need to do exactly the opposite of what your fear is. Then your whole life will change. And yes, you're going to have these pieces of glass in your foot. Don't try to numb them. Deal with them. Deal with the pieces of the glass and look at but look at this. Look at my new beautiful chandelier. Otherwise, we don't move on in life. And even Rav Nachman says here, he's saying here that in the actual problem is usually the solution, by the way. Whatever problem that you're in, that's usually the solution. That means if you dig deep, in that same problem is the solution. So now you guys understand that trauma is given to you with your bar mitzvah and your bris. It's coming to you. Get comfortable with it. Whatever it is, we don't even know what it is. We don't know how it's going to come. We don't want to get caught unprepared. We want to understand if I already had to deal with it. Baruch Hashem, I hope I already had one big round. I don't want to deal with another round. But if God forbid something happens, I know how to deal with it. I'll go against my nature, against my Yetzer Hara, by going against. If it's a guy, you know how many guys are waiting on the sideline that they don't want to commit because they don't want to give a ring, only because of fear. They'd rather fool around all their lives as long as they don't have to commit. Because the fear provides, meanwhile they could have had 3 kids. Meanwhile their whole life could have been different. But what are they doing? I can't do it again. You're weak. So what happens? You stay, you intermarry, whatever you do, and look what the social scene is going on today. A lot of guys are afraid to commit again. That's the biggest weakness you can have in life, is to have something control the rest of your life. All right? Any questions? Good? All right, that's today's class.